We took this 1999 Toyota Tacoma and completely gutted it. We took every single component from it, and our goal is to put it all into this 1988 Toyota pickup so we can make the ultimate sleeper with all the modern amenities.
All right, another day working on the 88 Toyota pickup. Last night we went ahead, we got the engine and transmission mocked up in there. Right now they're not perfect. We do need to drop this engine quite a bit. It's not on mounts, it's just sitting on some blocks of wood. So we're gonna jump under there, we're gonna check things out, and we're gonna see how we can get this transmission mounted, and then we can move on to modifying everything for this engine, oil pan, motor mounts, getting this thing bolted in there, and then we'll be on our way to being on the road. We got this thing up in the air. We're gonna go under and we're gonna see what we can do about getting this transmission mounted up, because it looks like it's gonna line up perfect. Look at that, we got the drive shaft in and it fits perfect. So we went ahead and we got the engine out. Now that it's set aside, I went ahead and pulled my spare engine that I had out. It is a 3RZ, so it is a little different than a 2RZ. It's got balance shafts, it's a little bit taller deck height, but it doesn't matter. I'm not interested in any of that. The motor mounts are the same, and the oil pan flange is the same, and it's got the exact same bill housing. So it'll bolt up in here just like a 2RZ would, and I can mock everything I need to up. I can get motor mounts built, I can get the oil pan built, and I can make sure everything's good to go. But for now, I'm gonna quit talking, I'm gonna get to work, and we're gonna start stuffing this engine bay full of a bunch of stuff. So you saw we got some more done. We got these plates mocked up for the motor mounts. We went ahead and we got them cut out, we got them drilled out, and they're good to go. All 4 holes line up on both sides. We've got a plate on both sides of the engine, and we've got these factory motor mounts in the bay ready to get mocked up. I've got some 2" by 3" square stock that's quarter wall. It's nice and thick, super stout, and I'm gonna go ahead and see what I can do to get it bolted here and welded to this so that I have a super solid motor mount that goes to factory mounts. That way it's easily serviceable. So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna start working on that, and we're gonna get this engine bolted up into the bay. Super excited about that, and that's gonna be a huge step to getting this thing back on the road. All right, I'm super pumped. We went ahead and we got some motor mounts built. We just had some 2" by 3" square stock. It's a 1/4" wall and some 1/4" plate. And we fabbed up some super simple motor mounts. They're super strong. They're not gonna go anywhere. They're stronger than the factory motor mounts, and they look pretty decent. A lot of things to do still, so we're gonna move on to steering. If you can see here, the steering box is a forward mount steering box on this Toyota pickup. And on the Toyota Tacoma that the steering column and dash came out of, and engine, the steering column came down and immediately took a straight downward turn and went to the rack and pinion that was placed really far backward in the engine bay. So since we're not doing that anymore, the steering column coming out of there that's got a U-joint is extremely short for what we're working with, and it is going to need extended to work with what we've got. So I'll show you what we're working with. These are the 2 steering joints we have to work with. This came from the Toyota Tacoma. It went just like this, and it went down to the rack and pinion at a really wicked angle, pretty much straight down. And then this came from this Toyota pickup, and it went just about like it does, straight from inside, that is the switches and the ignition, It is a solid piece with a CV joint here, not a U joint, so I cannot take it apart. And it goes all the way to the rag joint that is mounted to the steering box. I need this piece of collapsible steering column. So if I get in an accident, the steering column has the ability to collapse and I am safe. It doesn't send the steering column into my chest. So I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna lop it off up here, right by this weld, and I'm gonna see where that leaves me. When it is bolted to here, I'm gonna see how far away it leaves me from that. And then I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna take the factory Toyota Tacoma steering arm. I'm gonna feed it up in there. I'm going to attach it to the factory column, and we're gonna make some metal gluing happen, and we're gonna weld this column to the factory collapsible column. That way we still have a collapsible joint, we have a U joint in there so nothing binds, and we've got the factory rag joint so everything is nice and smooth and vibrations are dampened.
Start it up.
This thing is going awesome. We've got steering mocked up and we're making great progress every time we work on it. And today should be no exception. We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna dive right on in. We've got it up on jack stands. We're gonna go ahead and take apart this whole front end. We're gonna drop the steering and drop that cross member. We're gonna cut up a couple oil pans. This is the oil pan from the 22R that came out of this thing, from the stock Toyota pickup. And I also have the stock oil pan over there from the 2RZ that is going into this thing. And we're gonna go ahead, cut them both up and start making this thing an awesome little oil pan. It's gonna have to be super custom. We're gonna cut off the flange of the 2RZ pan, and we're gonna cut off the bottom half of the 22R pan that molds to the suspension and steering perfect, and then we're gonna make it work with the flange from the 2RZ. So I'm gonna go ahead and dive into that. I'm gonna start pulling down the front end because I'm gonna have to pull all of the steering and front cross member down to be able to get a good look at what's going on and make sure that I clear all of these things that are coming pretty close to the engine. After I get all that taken care of, I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna pull this out with my oil pen that's mocked up. I'm gonna turn this mock engine upside down and I'm gonna make sure I can get a pickup tube that works with that sump. Gonna get a pickup tube all the way to the deepest part of the sump, try and get a baffle in there, and after we get a pickup tube, a baffle, and everything made for that, we're gonna make sure it works with full rotation of the engine.
Lit. Start it up. This is lit.
All right, so we just finished up the oil pan, and as well as the oil pan, we started mocking up a pickup tube. But first, let's talk about this oil pan. It was definitely a little bit of a pain, but we got this whole rear section grafted on with a little bit more capacity than before, trying to keep the capacity on this thing as high as possible. I'm trying to make sure this thing's got plenty of oil in it so that it is not starving. And then over here, we've got this rear that had to be modified. This originally came back about that much further on the 22R pan. So I moved everything back on this so it would line up with the suspension components with where the engine is. We've got everything moved back. We've got clearance to put all of the bolts in, and it looks like everything's gonna work out good. Since we got this oil pan all figured out, we're gonna go ahead and check out this pickup tube. So, I can already hear what you're thinking. Is that plumbing components? And yes, it is. It feels wrong, but it's designed to flow fluids, and these corners aren't too crazy sharp. That's what I was most concerned about, is making tight 90-degree corners that weren't gonna restrict flow. So I think this is gonna work out, and I think this is gonna do what we needed to do. And everything I saw online, the radiuses were rather big. I went to the hardware store and I got a 90-degree black iron coupling that fit the diameter of this, and I went ahead and welded it onto the flange of the factory pickup tube. It's just tacked right now. I just wanted to make sure fitment wasn't gonna be an issue. And I went ahead and I utilized one of these just brace bolts that was already in here, and it has got a brace that I have tack welded and will more so weld out onto here to support the weight of this, because it is pretty heavy. Then I went ahead and cut up the screen off of the factory pickup tube. I'm gonna get everything welded out, and we're gonna make sure this thing's stout as could be. Then that'll be done with the oil pan and pickup tube. That's gonna be a huge move. I'll be able to put all of this on the engine that's going into the car, the truck, and I can have that engine installed. All right, we went ahead and finished welding out the entire pickup tube. We got it clearanced for these rods. So these aren't even big rods, but this is a stock 3RZ rod, and I needed to make sure there was plenty of clearance there so that we weren't having any issues when we got warm. Because, you know, when you get warm, things expand. You need 60 thousandths clearance is what people recommend. So I've got that taken care of. It is 100% ready to go, welded out. I'm gonna clean it up. And while I was welding that out, I threw a coat of paint on the engine mounts and on the oil pan, since I had it finished welded out, and it should be good to go. Let's go take a look at those. I think these are looking really good. The lighting isn't perfect out here, but came out really good. The paint looks really good. I went ahead and I etched in the back passenger and driver because they are different and I didn't want to mix them up. And this oil pan, having it all the same color really cleans it up. This front being bare metal and everything else being the crusty old oil pan didn't have a really good look to it. Since this stuff's now dry to the touch, I'm gonna throw this oil pan on. We're gonna test fit one more time on the test block. Then we can go ahead, throw everything on our good block, throw it in. But before we do that, I need to get fuel lines figured out. So look what I've got going for fuel lines. Factory lines on this truck are not gonna work. They're tiny, they're on the wrong side of the engine bay, and they're just, every single thing about them is wrong. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna rip these factory hard lines out. I pulled the factory hard lines from the Tacoma. We've got the entire hard line from the Tacoma, from the fuel tank all the way to the engine. This also conveniently, right where the fuel lines come out of the tank under the truck, there's a soft line that comes out that feeds it. It goes to the factory hard line, where this jog over is in this line. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna lot both these lines off right here. I'm gonna roll a bead in the end of both of them. And after I roll a bead in the end of both of them, I'll be able to slip a hose clamp on, and you run the factory hard line to a soft line to a Bosch 044 inline fuel pump that I'm gonna need to put in because this truck was originally carbureted. And that'll run straight to the factory lines on this truck. These lines have clips already, and there's actually locations on the chassis that have bolt holes right where that needs to go. All right, I got fuel lines in. I actually got them mounted to a couple locations.
on the chassis. That's awesome. And then they come all the way back here, and they're a little far back where they jog over. They jog over right at this cross member, but that's okay. That should give me just enough room. Look, the engine bay is done with fuel lines, and they come all the way up into here, and they don't rub anything. I need to put one riv nut in for this mount here. I'm going to go ahead and clear up the engine bay, and I think I'm ready to put the motor mounts, the oil pan, and the pickup tube on the good engine. Put it in the bay. Super exciting. Oh, no, no, no. I need an oil return line. No. All right, so you saw I went ahead and I welded on this dash 10 bung to the oil pan. This is actually my turbo return line. I needed that on there just to make sure that everything was ready to go. So when I put this oil pan on the good 2RZ engine, I don't have to modify it anymore. I can seal it on there with some RTV and we're good to go. While I was at it, I went ahead and I put this baffle in there. This is the factory 22R baffle. I just cut it up a little bit, modified it, made it fit with this pan. Since the pan was heavily modified, I had to heavily modify the baffle. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna pick up that good engine. I'm gonna get it on the hoist. I'm gonna empty the oil out of it. I'm gonna clean up the oil pan mating surface real good. I'm gonna put this pickup tube on it, and we'll be able to drop it in the bay. That's gonna be everything to get that engine in the bay. It's gonna have the proper motor mounts. It's gonna have the proper oil pan and pickup tube, and we'll be able to get it in there, hopefully for the final time. All right, well, less than ideal. Less than ideal for sure. I pulled the oil pan off of this engine that's now on a stand. I wasn't gonna put it on a stand, but when I pulled the oil pan off, I found some things I really didn't like. I really did not like how much flake was in this. There's some bigger chunks of flake and there's a lot of little glitter. So before I go doing anything stupid and, you know, hurting this engine any more than it already is, we're gonna go ahead and I've got it on the stand. I'm gonna pop down here. We're just gonna pull all of the main, all of the rod caps. We're gonna get to the bottom of what exactly this needs. Hopefully it just needs bearings. Hopefully it's no more than like an hour, hour and a half task. Get new bearings in it. Feel real good about the engine then. Put the new pickup tube, put the new oil pan on it, and be one step closer to getting this thing on the road. Just an unforeseen circumstance that we can get past. Could have been worse, could have been a lot worse. So still stoked. This is still moving extremely quick. We're still getting a lot done, and we're still making giant steps towards getting this engine in. Gotta keep our head up, roll with punches, but this thing is gonna be running in no time.